Welcome to Mysteries and Crime, where the shadows of the past reveal the darkest deeds of humanity. Tonight, we unravel the terrifying saga of the Golden State Killer, whose reign of terror spanned decades. Can you uncover the clue hidden within this chilling story? What was the significant tool used to ultimately identify the Golden State Killer after decades of evasion? Between 1974 and 1986, the Golden State Killer terrorized California with a series of heinous crimes. He was responsible for at least 13 murders, over 50 rapes, and numerous burglaries. His crime spree extended from Sacramento to Orange County, instilling fear across the state. In 2018, justice finally prevailed with his arrest. The Golden State Killer's first known crime occurred in Visalia, California, in 1974. A series of home burglaries escalated to violence. The peaceful community was gripped by fear as a masked intruder violated their sense of security. His modus operandi was chillingly methodical. Victims were often stalked for weeks. Phone calls with heavy breathing. Windows pried open quietly in the dead of night. Once inside, the assailant used ropes to bind his victims, often couples, inflicting psychological torment before the physical brutality began. For years, law enforcement scrambled to piece together the fragments of evidence left behind. The killer's sudden disappearance in 1986 left investigators perplexed. The case grew cold. Families were left shattered, their cries for justice echoing into silence. It wasn't until April 24th, 2018, that the Golden State Killer was unmasked. Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer, was arrested, bringing an end to the nightmare that haunted California for over 4 decades. The victims of the Golden State Killer were individuals who, in the blink of an eye, had their futures shattered, their lives forever altered by a predator who seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to evade capture. These were not nameless, faceless casualties. They were fathers, mothers, friends, and loved ones who were robbed of their time on Earth in the most brutal ways imaginable. The first known murder victim, Claude Snelling, was a father from Visalia, California, shot in 1975 while heroically attempting to protect his teenage daughter from being abducted. Claude's death was an act of bravery, yet it was met with the unforgiving violence of a man whose insidious nature knew no bounds. His tragic death marked the beginning of the killer's string of violence, an omen of the horrors that would follow. In Sacramento, the killer's cruelty reached into the home of Jane Carson Sandler, a young mother who was violently assaulted in 1976 while her child slept nearby, unaware of the terror that had taken over their home. Jane's survival in the face of such an ordeal became a testament to her strength, and she would go on to become a vocal advocate for other survivors of violent crime. However, the psychological scars of that night would remain a part of her forever. Then, in the quiet suburb of Rancho Cordova, the Harringtons, Keith and Patrice, were found murdered in 1980. The couple, just beginning to enjoy life together, was tragically robbed of their futures, leaving behind the haunting memory of what might have been. In Goleta, 2 more victims, Sherry Domingo and Greg Sanchez, were murdered in 1981. Their lives, full of promise, were similarly stolen, adding to the growing list of individuals who had unknowingly crossed paths with a monster. From young couples starting new chapters in their lives to single individuals full of potential, each victim carried their own unique story, their own set of dreams and aspirations. The Golden State Killer's trail of destruction stretched across a vast swath of California, leaving in its wake not only the lives of the victims, but also the shattered hopes of families who were forced to carry the weight of unspeakable loss. The memory of these victims echoes through the annals of true crime, each name a haunting reminder of the precious lives taken far too soon. Their stories forever entwined with the legacy of a terror that, for decades, seemed impossible to defeat. For decades, the Golden State Killer evaded capture, his identity shrouded in mystery. With each passing year, the list of potential suspects grew, ranging from military personnel to ex-convicts, each profile offering a glimmer of hope, yet none providing definitive answers. The killer's ability to remain undetected for so long fueled endless theories and speculation. Law enforcement analysts described him as methodical, intelligent, and deeply disturbed. His attacks were not random acts of violence, but carefully planned and executed crimes, suggesting a man with patience, precision, and an unsettling understanding of human behavior. Many suspected that the killer had a background in law enforcement or military service. His meticulous nature, his ability to evade capture despite an extensive investigation, and his knowledge of police procedures all pointed to someone who could manipulate the system. Investigators theorized that the killer may have had insider knowledge, allowing him to avoid detection for years. This theory was supported by the fact that many of his crimes appeared to be eerily calculated, making it nearly impossible for authorities to predict his next move. In April of 2018, the arrest of Joseph James DeAngelo shattered the lingering mystery. A former Navy serviceman and police officer, DeAngelo fit the profile disturbingly well. His career in law enforcement had granted him access to crucial information about police tactics and investigative procedures, allowing him to stay one step ahead for decades. Neighbors described him as a quiet, reclusive man with a strange intensity. A man who seemed to keep to himself, yet his unsettling presence never fully disappeared from the community. When DeAngelo was arrested, it sent shockwaves throughout California and beyond. The idea that a former law enforcement officer, someone sworn to protect and serve, could be the very monster terrorizing communities for so many years was almost incomprehensible. Investigators believed that his job not only gave him access to vital law enforcement information, but also allowed him to manipulate investigations, throwing off investigators and remaining under the radar for decades. The Golden State Killer was no longer an elusive figure in the dark. He was a man with a face, a history, and a reckoning that was long overdue. The Golden State Killer's crime spree was a terrifying blend of precision, violence, and psychological warfare. His first known attacks in the mid-1970s were marked by home invasions in suburban Sacramento. Victims would often recount the haunting moments before the attack, phone calls with heavy breathing, shadows glimpsed outside windows, eerie sensations of being watched. Once inside, his modus operandi was chillingly methodical. Victims, often couples, were bound with ropes he brought with him. Men were tied up and left helpless as they listened to the unspeakable horror inflicted upon their partners. The killer's signature was not only his violence, but the mind games he played. He would place dishes on the backs of bound men, warning them that any movement would result in their partner's death. Over time, his methods escalated. Murders replaced assaults. From the East Area rapist in Sacramento to the original Night Stalker in Southern California, his terror knew no bounds. Victims were found strangled, bludgeoned, or shot. Homes were ransacked, often with items stolen as macabre trophies. His ability to slip in and out of homes undetected baffled authorities. The sheer brutality left behind was matched only by the psychological scars on survivors. Many lived in fear for decades, haunted by the memory of a masked intruder whispering threats in the dark. Despite extensive investigations, the killer vanished in 1986, leaving behind shattered lives and unanswered questions. His arrest in 2018 revealed a horrifying truth. The Golden State Killer had lived among them all along, blending into society, waiting, watching, and until then, unseen. For decades, law enforcement agencies across California chased shadows. Composite sketches were circulated, crime scenes meticulously examined, hundreds of suspects interrogated, but the Golden State Killer remained elusive. The advent of criminal profiling helped narrow down potential suspects. Behavioral analysts described a meticulous, sadistic predator with military precision. Yet, every promising lead dissolved into frustration. Task forces formed and disbanded, but the case endured. It wasn't until advancements in genetic genealogy that a breakthrough occurred. In 2018, investigators uploaded the killer's DNA profile to an open-source genealogy database. A distant familial match led them to Joseph James DeAngelo. 24-hour surveillance was established, and a discarded DNA sample sealed his fate. Decades of despair gave way to hope. Forensics in the 1970s and 80s were rudimentary compared to today. Crime scenes often lacked clear evidence. The killer's meticulousness further complicated matters. No fingerprints, minimal DNA, and an ever-evolving modus operandi. Investigators collected fibers, footprints, and stolen items, but no direct link emerged. The case's revival through modern forensics was groundbreaking. DNA from decades-old crime scenes was preserved. Technology had finally caught up. Genetic genealogy, the use of familial DNA to identify suspects, was pivotal. A painstaking search through family trees, distant cousins, and historical records eventually led to DeAngelo's doorstep, proving that even the most careful predator could not escape science forever. The arrest of Joseph James DeAngelo in 2018 sent shockwaves through California. Survivors who lived in fear for decades finally felt seen, heard. Victims' families experienced a bittersweet relief. Communities once paralyzed by fear reflected on the years of terror. Vigilantes claimed they always suspected someone among them. Others were horrified to learn the quiet neighbor was a monster in disguise. The trauma resurfaced, but so did hope for closure. Public outcry for justice grew louder as the case that haunted California finally reached its reckoning. The media frenzy was immediate. Headlines screamed of the Golden State Killer's capture. News segments revisited the haunting crime scenes. Survivor interviews gripped audiences. The revelation that a former police officer was behind the decades-long terror sparked intense debate. How could law enforcement have missed him? True crime documentaries, podcasts, and books dissected every detail. Every update from the courtroom was broadcast live. The media's relentless coverage not only informed, but reignited public fascination and horror. The Golden State Killer's arrest was not just a criminal case, but a moment in history that redefined forensic investigation and true crime storytelling. Before Joseph James DeAngelo's arrest, theories abounded. Was the killer a military veteran, a police officer, a drifter with an uncanny ability to evade detection? Each profile added to the mystery. Some speculated the killer lived near the victims. Others believed he traveled specifically to commit crimes. Behavioral profiles suggested someone methodical, intelligent, and deeply disturbed. The revelation that DeAngelo was a former police officer added a chilling layer. Did his law enforcement background help him stay ahead? Was he hiding in plain sight all along? Theories now shifted to how, not who. How did a man sworn to serve and protect become one of the most prolific predators in history? In June 2020, Joseph James DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 murders and numerous other crimes, avoiding the death penalty. Survivors faced him in court, their voices trembling but resolute. Families of victims held photographs, memories frozen in time. DeAngelo, frail and silent, offered apologies that many found hollow. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a decades-long nightmare. But for many, the scars remain. Life sentences ensured he would die behind bars. But questions lingered. How many more victims were there? What drove his sadistic impulses? And could such horrors have been prevented if he had been caught sooner? The trial closed a chapter, but the story of the Golden State Killer will forever echo in history. The Golden State Killer's capture brought closure to many, but questions remain. Were there more victims lost to time? What sparked his decades-long killing spree? And why did he stop in 1986? Did his career in law enforcement allow him to manipulate investigations? Even with his conviction, some pieces of the puzzle are missing. The full truth behind the terror remains elusive, leaving us to wonder, what more is hidden in the shadows? The Golden State Killer case reshaped law enforcement forever. Genetic genealogy became a pivotal tool in solving cold cases. Survivor advocacy grew stronger. True crime storytelling evolved, drawing millions into the haunting depths of unsolved mysteries. California's communities, once gripped by fear, found strength in unity, but the scars remain. The case highlighted the importance of perseverance and justice, and the horrifying reality that predators can hide in plain sight. Did you catch tonight's clue? What was the significant tool used to ultimately identify the Golden State Killer after decades of evasion? What are your thoughts on the Golden State Killer case? Could better technology have caught him sooner? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more true crime mysteries. As always, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.